Warriors, we have a mission of educating about all forms of sexual exploitation and certainly always supporting survivors and families. Warning, today we are going to have a brutal discussion. I use the word brutal because we need to get very realistic. We really need to talk about, what does grooming mean? Is there a better word for that? We need to talk about families. Well, we have a terrific guest. It is his story to tell, so I don't want to tell you too much. We have a father of three beautiful daughters, Chris McGhee, joining us. So buckle up. You've been warned, but we're going to get real. And Chris is very aware, as a dad, of the challenges facing kids today and families, because in this overwhelming environment, I think we can all agree on, we live in, whether it's just cultural issues, it's the education system, fallout. We know, we have studies now proving this. Parents know anyway, without studies, fallout from the pandemic, what's been going on. And also things like the internet, things that Chris didn't have and I didn't have growing up, or a lot of you didn't have, that we now have to deal with. I think we can agree it's a tough world out there. I'm going to say, here we go, Chris. Chris's daughter was assaulted by a York City, Pennsylvania police officer. And Chris, and he is the definition of a warrior, bravely decided, along with his daughter and his family, that they would not stand by and watch this attack. Chris would not tolerate any of this. So he started finding out about laws and legislation and fighting back. So Chris McGhee is here today to discuss what happened to his daughter and his family, and how he is really honoring our warriors hashtag, which is community creates change. He is bravely stepping up to the plate and changing laws and coming out. And we need exactly the male voice, the dad voice in our society to step up and start talking about all of this. So I will not go on and on about you, Chris McGhee, but welcome to the Warriors.
Well, Lynn, thank you for having me. Excited to be here. I do need to say right up front, though, I appreciate the warm introduction, but I continue to say my daughter was the brave one, is the brave one. She's the one that I actually look up to. If she was willing to press charges and face down the defense and demand accountability and justice for this predator, I've got the easy part. So, but I appreciate that, and I welcome the fight and carry this forward.
No, and you listen. She's an incredible young woman too. You know, we deal with a lot of victims and survivors at the Warriors, and mostly Chris, they want to put it aside, forget about it, erase it, or the family does, if the family even knows about it. So you are all to be applauded, and she certainly is a shining example. But before we jump into exactly what happened and what's going on, I will say you were outraged. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I'm all over the place, Chris, with this, but you were just outraged at the failure of the legal system, and you really decided to become a warrior. Now we're going to leave that for a second. First, I want to hear something about you, Chris. Where did you grow up? Well, a little tidbit. Let's break the ice here. What do you want us to know about you?
I'm just a boring dad.
No,
we live
Don't
in
ever
we
say
live
that.
No. we live in the suburbs of York, Pennsylvania. We moved here about 5-6 years ago. My wife had completed her graduate degree and got a job up here. I work in talent development. I do a lot of leadership development and whatnot. I like old motorcycles. I like new motorcycles. And as you said, I'm the proud father of 3 beautiful girls that keep me on my toes. I've got a patch of gray hair named after each one of them. And I at this point in my life, I have decided to take on a fight. Not just for my daughter, but for all survivors. We haven't really gotten into our story yet, but the reality is that we're very fortunate. The York City Police Department believed us. They listened to us. They supported us. the district attorney here in York took on our case. Not all survivors are so fortunate. We were able to hold this predator accountable somewhat. Certainly not as much as he should have been, but the truth of the matter is we got much further along than most survivors. So we have a responsibility to use our voice for all of those other survivors that have not been given this opportunity. So that's what brings us here today.
But that's why I'm calling you a warrior, because you're doing this, and most people, Chris, would not do this. Let me point out the website is chrismcghee.com. We're going to have all of this, Chris, in the body of the video, so people can take their time. They can read stories, links. You've got a great blog on there, tips for parents, families. Okay, now let's get to the crux of the matter here. Please tell us the story. What happened?
Sure. So in 2020, my youngest was raped by a classmate. She was a freshman. She was raped by an upperclassman, and as a result, as with most survivors and victims of sexual assault, she struggled. She went into a depression. She had a lot of shame. She suffered PTSD, and my wife and I were, when we learned about the assault, when we learned about the rape, we wanted to find resources for our youngest, and we had her in therapy. We were doing the things that we thought we needed to do, but we were looking for ways for my daughter to be surrounded by positive influences. And a friend of my wife's had gotten us connected with some community walks here in York, Pennsylvania. And these were simply just that. They were walks that were facilitated by the police department. The commissioner of police gathered about a half a dozen people together, other officers, community leaders, probation officers, teachers, ministers, to simply walk the neighborhoods that maybe where often police were not welcome visitors to the area. And so my daughter and I began attending these walks. Just a great opportunity to meet other citizens of York. And on the walk, there was a student resource officer and a member of the York City Police Department by the name of Joseph Palmer. And Joseph was, as a student resource officer, he was 28. He was engaging, charismatic, and took an interest in my daughter and wanted to help her, wanted to mentor her. As we got to know each other, we developed a friendship, and we shared with him her struggles and what was going on. And so he took that as an opportunity to begin grooming her, as well as my wife and I, to build trust, to build a relationship, saying all the right things, and slowly laying the groundwork for him to eventually sexually assault her. And when my wife and I learned about this, probably about 4 months after the last assault, we were as you can certainly imagine, we were outraged, and we, with our daughter's approval, we reached out to the commissioner of police, and because we had a friendship with him through the community walks, and we began the process of pressing charges and cooperating with the district attorney's office to hold this predator accountable. Fast forward a year and a half, Joseph Palmer received a plea deal to corruption of a minor of a sexual nature. He received 3 to 5 years of probation. He received no jail time. He received no mandatory registration on the national database of sex offenders. Literally, Lynn, in the state of Pennsylvania, if you steal a car, you are likely going to receive a more severe punishment than Joseph Palmer received. So at that final hearing, watching him walk out of the courtroom a free man was really a seminal moment for me. It was simply unacceptable. And outside the courthouse, there were a number of officers that had attended that final hearing in support of our family. And one of the officers said to me, "You want to consider changing the law that allowed this to happen," because there were no winners that day. The system had let my daughter down. So I having no experience in law and legal matters other than what we had just gone through, I did a very quick Google search. And I found within the span of about 5 minutes, about a half a dozen very similar cases in the state of Pennsylvania where a student resource officer had sexually assaulted a child and had received the exact same plea deal within the previous 5 years. So quite frankly, Lynn, without knowing what I was asking for, I printed these stories out. I made an appointment with my local legislator, Representative Joe Diorsi, and I laid all of these things out on the table in front of him. And I explained our case, and I simply said, the Pennsylvania laws allowed this to happen, and I'm not okay with this. Are you okay with this? And Representative Diorsi, as a father of young children, was equally outraged. And about 2 months later, HB 1847 was introduced to the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. And that essentially closes this loophole where it upgrades the charge of corruption of a minor of a sexual nature to a felony when it is committed by a peace officer. It upgrades the sentencing guidelines to include mandatory jail time, and certainly moves the law forward to hold these predators accountable. Look, this isn't going to help my family. Our case is done. But clearly, this happens far more often than anyone realizes. And when you see the system failing in such an egregious manner to allow this to happen, and then to see this predator walk out of the courtroom as a free individual is simply unacceptable. And it simply needs to stop.
And you know, failing children when they're supposed to be protecting children and helping children, it is outrageous. I think, Chris, I don't think, I know, this happens so much, but people don't come forward. They don't want to talk about it. I want to go back on something, because something I find here at the Warriors, people really don't understand. We use that word grooming a lot, right? Because that's the word.
Yep.
I'm trying to come up with a better word. and change everything around, because I actually did have a few different people over the years say to me, "You mean grooming, like hairdressing?" Like they really didn't understand, right? Because like what you know and I know, we can't take for granted. The public, we're just used to saying grooming and all that. But if you can think of a better word, but we'll use grooming for now. Explain how easily this grooming happens, because I have dealt with this exactly what you described. The way they worm their way in, they're very smart, these predators, but really break it down a little bit and explain what it means and how somebody is able to really get in there and do this.
Well, I first want to comment on, as you pointed out, the word grooming. My friend Mary Simmerling has who I believe was a recent guest on your show. It has a great term for this. She refers to it as predatory manipulation.
Yes.
Because it is manipulation. Absolutely. And predators begin by selecting their victims. There is nothing casual or accidental or coincidental about it. They select their victims. And in our case, after the rape by an upperclassman, my daughter fell into a serious depression. And in the early spring of 2021, she attempted suicide.
Oh, no.
And that was that obviously helped us to understand we need to lean into this much closer. And that predicated our reaching out to the and being a part of these community walks. The officer, Joseph Palmer, was aware of that. So that let him know that this is a child that is in need. This is a child that has a history of trauma. And predators will look at that and find that they're easy pickings. Yes. Because they often, and it's not just children, but adults as well, when you endure when you go through a trauma, you begin to have a very distorted view of what caring looks like. Yes. And what you or I may look at as inappropriate conversations, discussions, inappropriate touch. If you've been through a trauma, you have a very distorted view of that. So that's the first thing. A lot of predators will look for children who are in a difficult family situation. Maybe there's a divorce. Maybe both parents are working. This allows them to very easily position themselves as a dear friend of the family. Hey, don't worry about it. I'll pick the kid up from school. Don't worry about it. Hey, I'll go ahead and take the kid out for supper tonight. Don't worry about it. I know you're working late. So mom and dad are now looking at this person as, oh, thank you so much. They are slowly building trust, not just with the victim, but also with the family. Now, with the victim, they are also trying to build trust by maybe sharing some things of themselves. Maybe they're sharing, they're having inappropriate conversations that are certainly not age appropriate. They will often purchase alcohol, maybe purchase cigarettes, things of that nature. Sometimes adults will let the child drive their vehicle. All of these things are slowly providing the predator to say, hey, don't forget, I gave you alcohol. You're not supposed to be drinking alcohol. So now the child is trapped. If I come forward and I tell mom and dad that this person purchased alcohol for me and I accepted it, now I'm in trouble. So oftentimes those victims are going to be afraid to say anything because they're going to get in trouble too. So there is a gradual buildup where the predator is beginning to have dirt on the victim. And so now they are able to cross the line. And once that line is crossed, they're letting the victim know, hey, you didn't fight me off. You wanted it too. And in our case, because we had a police officer, this officer was saying to our daughter, hey, look, you've previously cried rape. You're obviously not well because you tried to kill yourself. Nobody is going to believe you. And they're certainly not going to believe you over me, who's a police officer. And let's be very clear, as an officer, I have the ability to get you locked up. And your mom and dad love me, so this needs to stay between you and I. So the victim feels as if they're in a trap.
Yes.
And that this is the grooming behavior that takes place where they are, and again, they're also keeping very close relations with the parents to make sure that they are continuing that relationship of, hey, I care about your child. You know, the reality is that over 90% of sexual assaults are happened by someone that is known by the family. The days of stranger danger, and we all need to be afraid of that homeless person down in the park. Those are not the people we need to be primarily concerned about. Are there things happening by strangers? Absolutely. But the vast majority of these sexual assaults are happening by somebody that is known by the victim. And so parents have got to lean into this conversation and have more awareness of the grooming process.
Chris, I'm so happy you brought that up, because we are constantly pointing out it is somebody near the child, somebody near to the family, and it is not talked about nearly enough. And we have to keep stressing that. So I'm so happy you brought that up. How did it break forth, though? Did your daughter come forward and come to you, or like, how did this all then come out into the open air, as we like to say, into the public?
Yeah. So when I say he was grooming my daughter and my wife and I, he also began grooming my middle daughter. And he began reaching out to her, and he began stalking her. And she was also conflicted. Hey, this is a cop, right? This guy is having creepy, inappropriate conversations with me. At the time, she was 19 years old. She had a much better idea of what is appropriate, not appropriate. And this is a cop who is married with children. He certainly should not be asking me for nudes and asking for having very inappropriate texts. But what does she do? This is someone that mom and dad are holding in very high regard. He's a good influence on my little sister. Maybe he's just being creepy with me. I'm not going to say anything. And it wasn't until he had actually begun trying to reach out at her at the hospital she worked at, because as an officer, he was able to get further into the hospital because, well, he's a cop, right? And when she learned that he had been coming onto her floor and was trying to reach out to her, that's when she began to compare notes with our youngest. And that's when things very, very quickly unraveled, like within moments. And at that point, our youngest and her older sister pulled my wife and I into the conversation. And within an hour, we were on the phone with the commissioner of police.
Good for them. How
Yes.
brave of them to,
Yes.
first of all, to go to you and your wife, because we
Mhm.
talk to a lot of kids, we do a lot of focus groups, and they're afraid this kind of stuff, to go to their parents. They're afraid they may have, exchanged a nude image back, as an example,
Mhm.
and they're in the thick of it. And then it's that victim blaming, which you so well explained, Chris, the holding the power. It's always where somebody's vulnerable, and then they start from that nice guy or woman, person,
Mhm. Mhm.
working their way in, and then they become, I'm gonna use the word again, like slavery. The
Mhm.
person just feels enslaved, the child, they don't know what to do. So good for the girls, to coming to you, and good for both of you believing, because this is a tough thing for somebody who's been close to the family, and you think is helping you and is good. And but again, it's that same, they all have the same, like, motives here, the same way they operate. It's the same story, Chris. Now, let's move forward. You're very lucky that people believed you, because again, we have most cases, it's always, and that's why they don't continue. The victim will not come forward. They're not believed. Again, they may be really in a vulnerable, and they usually are, situation, family wise. The parents will say, stop it. To be a single parent, we're not going to do this. Don't open a can of worms, all that kind of stuff. So now what happened? You go to court. Let me ask you something. Do you think, I guess most people just don't know that this law, like this, there are no really laws about this. Would that be fair to say? I guess they don't. That's why you're changing it, because this is, and how the internet now has really brought even more forward, because now we can have proof, right? If we use
Yeah.
images from phones and things like that. But the power of the internet, I have to interject with that a little bit, because you pointed out there were text messages and things like that. And this is what I think parents, how is as parents of three daughters, were you, what can I say? Um, the internet. How did you deal with that? Or did you just think it's okay? They know what they're doing. We've learned so much in the last few years about what's going on the internet. And it's really like opening your front door to the entire
Mhm.
world, right? Um, what can you share about, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, Chris, but like any of that with the internet?
You know, so my wife and I are fairly tech savvy, and we are certainly aware of the dangers online, and that there are predators online. So we had those conversations. But predators are very skilled at what they do.
Yes.
And so one of the very first things that Joseph Palmer did was he moved all conversations with my daughter to Snapchat.
Of course he
And
did.
if your viewers are not familiar with Snapchat, it's time to lean in. Snapchat is an insidious tool where the text messages, the images that are shared after they are viewed go away. So when he would ask for nudes, when he would share nudes with her, and again, as we talked about with grooming, when he would share a nude and she would then reciprocate, now he's got her. And so he's also well aware that they're going to go away. And so there is no digital footprint of those images. Now, during the our court case, the prosecution did um, request all of the records from Snapchat from my daughter's phone, and thinking that, well, maybe we can get something. And they were able to get some texts, but all of those images were lost. So he knew what he was doing. And so predators are well aware of what they can and can't get away with. And let's also be very clear here. If you think my daughter was the first victim of his, you are very mistaken. And unfortunately, my daughter was the only one that was willing to come forward and press charges. Now, I cannot blame those other children for not doing so, because it's scary. This is not an easy process. Uh, my daughter had the full support of her family. We had the support of the York City Police Department. But this is not easy. And so there were other children out there that the prosecution did speak with, but were not comfortable coming forward and going on the record and pressing charges for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. Sad.
So
Yeah.
he knew what he was doing. He had done it before. And quite frankly, he would have continued to do it if my daughter had not done what she did and got him off the street and took that badge away. In fact, not even 3 months after he received this sweetheart plea deal, part of the plea deal was that he was not supposed to go onto a school campus without the express approval of his probation officer. And within 3 months, he did. And so he violated his probation. And then he finally received 5 months in jail for violating his probation. As frustrating as it was that he did not see jail time for what he did to my daughter, at least he had some accountability. It was better than nothing.
Wow. And where, may I ask, where is he today? Did he like move out of state? Is he still around there? Like, where is he?
No, he is, he's moved to a different county. I am able to keep track of him through his probation officer. And I make sure that every time he has to go before a judge, I'm in the courtroom
Good.
to see what's happening. But he is no longer able to carry a gun. He is not going to be a police officer because he is not allowed to be near children. That does limit his job opportunities. Last I heard, he was driving a tow truck in the adjoining county, but he's my daughter has taken him off the streets, and you know, for that I am I'm terribly proud of her for doing that.
Wow. And you know, just with our work at the Warriors, Chris, you know, once a predator, this is really, and there are studies that will, you know, support
Yeah.
this, always a predator.
Yeah.
And even as you pointed out, going back to a school, at least he went to jail for violating the probation, something,
Yeah.
right? But they don't really, they show you who they are and they don't really change their tune, unfortunately, which is so important about this HB 1847. Where does it stand right now? How can the public help you? Because we want to get all of our warriors, whether they can help sign on, look into their communities, what's going on there. Tell us, give us more, because I like to give people homework. You know, research, start things, let you be the lead, and they started in their community.
Absolutely. So it has been it's been a journey. It's been a learning experience. It was introduced last year, and my daughter and I began lobbying members of the Judiciary Committee here in Pennsylvania to take a vote on the bill, to take it up for a vote, and to try to get support. And ultimately, what I have learned is the dysfunction of the politics at the federal level is also alive and well at the state level. And the bill, while I got a whole lot of lip service about, yep, this makes a lot of sense, this is important, we're going to look into this. It didn't go anywhere. It was not taken up for a vote. However, Joe Diorsi is a Republican. Chris Pielli is a representative from Westchester here in Pennsylvania. He is a Democrat who also signed on to the bill last year. And they have decided to co-prime the bill and reintroduce it in January in 2025. So next month, it is going to be reintroduced. It will receive a new bill number. So HB 1847 will become a different number. And unfortunately, I don't have that number yet.
That's okay. We'll be on top of it for you. Don't worry.
Beautiful. And when it is reintroduced, my daughter and I are going to begin this process again. We're going to start lobbying all of the members of the Judiciary Committee
Good.
to take an interest in this bill, to demand it be taken up for a vote, so that we can ultimately get it in front of the governor. What can your warriors do? Well, certainly if you live within the state of Pennsylvania, you can reach out to your legislator and ask about the status of this. Ask what is happening with this bill. Why is this being allowed? Now, the next thing is that if you are not living in the state of Pennsylvania, what can you do? Well, if it's happening here in Pennsylvania, it is probably happening in Utah, in Montana, in Arkansas, in Florida. You have a right to know about the laws in your state and how we are protecting survivors of sexual assault.
Mm-hmm.
And so you absolutely should be reaching out to your legislator and ask, how are we protecting survivors? How are we holding predators accountable? Demand greater awareness on this subject. Look, nobody wants to have these conversations. These are not fun conversations to have. Quite frankly, it is not always terribly fun in our house, but this is our reality. We all need to lean into this. If you have an interest in a child, any child, whether it's your own child or a niece or a nephew or a grandchild or a family friend, it is on you to lean in and be part of this and demand change.
Chris, I just think we live in a new kind of country. This is my thinking. Like, everybody must and can do something, right? I really have this attitude of that with our warriors. We have a lot of warriors in Pennsylvania. So this is something that can be helpful, but I find we have to give the people, like, okay, this is what you have to do. I actually call it homework. This is what you need to know about, because as you pointed out, it's dark, it's ugly, all this stuff. I'm sure you wish you didn't have to talk about it. I wish I didn't. We can't help ourselves. We have to be the ones to help everybody else talk about it. Finish us up, Chris, with anything in this holiday season you want to leave us with. I'm very hopeful with what you've brought forth today. This is learning for our warriors out there, for the public to learn about. They need to know about this. I'm very thankful for your family, your daughter, both your daughters coming forward, speaking with you. But leave us again in this time of, I'm going to just call it, the hopeful holiday season. What do you want everybody to know or think about?
We all have a role to play. And as a father of a survivor, I was very fortunate. I didn't have to worry about losing my job. I didn't have to worry about how it was going to impact me.
Yeah.
And I realize not everyone is so fortunate. And so parents, supporters, loved ones of a survivor, I want you to understand that you do not need to just change a law in order to show your support. You don't need to rally your legislators. You can show your support, and you can advocate by simply being a loving support for that survivor, for your children, to lean in a little closer and hold them a little tighter. Have conversations. Look, I absolutely still honor our police officers. The vast majority of our police officers are good, decent, hardworking men and women. And unfortunately, the individuals like Joseph Palmer have a way of getting an awful lot of attention and really casting a huge shadow on the hard work that our officers do. And so it's important for us as supporters and as parents to understand that we have to be mindful that while we do respect our law officers and our judges and our doctors and our teachers and our politicians, that there are bad actors out there. And so as parents, we need to be aware of those grooming activities that we spoke about.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, we have to simply be aware that not everyone has good intentions for our children. And so we have to be mindful of that. As parents, we've got to be very aware of this. We've got to be paying attention to the people that our children are spending time with, that we are taking an active interest and an active role in our children's lives. But ultimately, when a child comes forward and says, I was touched inappropriately, our number one job is to believe them.
Yes.
Absolutely believe them. That is not the time to clarify, to get more information, to validate, to verify their story or anything like that. If they are coming forward, believe them, love them. And again, you don't have to go out and you don't have to go change laws. You don't have to begin calling your legislators and demand change in order to support your child, in order to love your child. That is the path that I took. But it is absolutely okay for you to hold your child, to maybe help find some resources, find support groups, offer to take your child in for a rape kit at the hospital, stay with them. But it is not the time for you to be verifying their story. It is not the time for you to be making decisions for them and saying, we're gonna go to the police. That survivor has to be part of that decision. That is not an easy decision to make. You know, and your question was, in this holiday season, what can we do? You know, it's loving our children.
Mm-hmm.
It's being present in their lives.
Yes.
It's taking an active role. The world is not an evil place. The world is not an awful place with everyone out to get your children. There are people that do have very bad intentions. It's on us to lean in, to be present, to be aware, but also to make sure that we have our children's back and that we're supporting them and loving them.
Excellent. I like that I saw, Chris, on your website, chrismcghee.com. Again, all information will be in the body of this video. You said, but not knowing what to do is not an acceptable reason to do nothing. I really like that. I just think that tells us kind of everything. And also just being there. I like that you pointed out, just be there. A child usually really tells you what's happening. You just have to listen and be there for them. Please promise me, Chris, we will be here for you. We'd like to speak again with you, follow up on this HB 1847 when it's being given a new number in January, and get our warriors to help you in Pennsylvania and also educate in other states. We're going to find out. You know, I'm going to do a little digging around also and make sure I can provide people with information. But promise me that we will speak again soon, because we also need the dad voice, the male voice, to step up and help us understand what's happening. It is very, very important. So I want to say to you, happy holidays to you and your beautiful family. Thank you to all of you. So brave to come forward like this. You're both your daughters. I'm sorry this happened to you, but look at all the good that you're doing now and educating other people, Chris McGhee. So you truly are a warrior. Happy holidays, and let us speak again soon.
Lynn, thank you so much for the opportunity. It was my pleasure. And if I could just offer, please do not hesitate to reach out. If you're a parent of a survivor, please do not hesitate to reach out. You can get a hold of me through my website. You're not in this alone. And there's often a lot of shame, a lot of guilt that You allowed this to happen to your child. You didn't. You did not allow this to happen to your child. But you can't do it alone. So please feel free to reach out to me. I'm here to help. Again, Lynn, thank you so much for helping me get this message out. And I look forward to coming back and sharing the success of the passage of the bill and talking about our next bill that we're going to start fighting for.
Well, we're going to be here for you, Chris, and your family. And again, I'm going to have everything about you, with your contact information in the body, because I like that you pointed out, power in numbers. You're not alone. Ask a question. No question is too dumb. I have a lot of people say, well, I was afraid. No question's too dumb. Find out. Chris has been through so many things. I mean, dad, new bills, legislation, family, everything going on. You're just terrific. So we will indeed, Chris, speak again soon. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Lynn.